Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about flawed interviewing processes. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, why is it so many tech companies that continue to rely on flawed interviewing processes instead of adopting alternative methods such as project-based evaluation, work trials, portfolio reviews, take-home assignments, pair programming, or blind hiring? It's usually a matter of who decides the hiring process and their experiences of what's going to work and so forth. In most companies, you will have a range of people who have experience with hiring technical talent and how to do assessments and things like that. So, one of the things that you will hear me sort of regurgitate over and over is this idea that I think that the leadership requirements in IT are fairly low. In other words, most of the people who do the job of, say, a hiring manager, engineering manager, anything like that, they don't really have a background as software developers themselves. And as you can imagine, it's the same thing for me. If I were to say if I were to formulate an evaluation process to figure out if a industry professional in an industry I am not knowledgeable about, like my idea of how to evaluate that individual would probably be kind of far from what maybe most people would consider to be important. So if I was supposed to hire lawyers or doctors or stuff like that, and I'm going to give them some type of challenge to prove that they know their stuff, right? It's going to be the work of an amateur basically, because I have no idea what I'm doing. And engineer managers are exactly that. What they're trying to do is to figure out what type of evaluation process do we need. And usually what they will do, due to a lack of personal experience, is that they will pick up whatever is trendy. And that's why you, for example, have Scrum, Safe, you have like these like Catis and Lead Code challenges and things like that. Like, guys, these are all various methodologies of doing something that may or may not bring some value depending on the situation. And you, as a real industry professional, might have a better idea of what would be an efficient way of evaluation. That is one part of it. But then I'll give you touch on a little bit as well on a few of these which might give you a different perspective. So something that I've said before, guys, is that when you have the time, or depending on like what hiring strategy you're looking for, right? It, in my opinion, if you have access to very senior software developers who really know their stuff, it might be more efficient for you to just go to a personal interview immediately with the candidate, given that they fulfill the basic criteria on their CV, of course. And the reason being because the way that at least I figure out if someone's really good at software development has very little to do with their coding. There is absolutely a grain of truth in that the code itself will tell me something about the individual, but I will get more from a conversation with the individual. And so doing an upfront code test might not necessarily be the best thing. And in many cases, I will learn more from just having a conversation with them. But imagine now that I need to do my regular job. Let's say that because usually, guys, you don't, as I said, the engineering managers can't do this on average. And even if they could, they're also very busy because hiring processes, guys, it's not like you have usually people just sitting around doing evaluations all the time. You have a limited time budget. And let's say that you get a lot of candidates. An average job position can have quite a lot of people applying for it depending on circumstances and stuff like that. I mean, I don't even want to imagine how many people who are applying to, say, Google or like the FANG companies and stuff like that. And so if you can think about it yourself, if you're going to have a, well, between 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how long the process is going to be and the interviews and stuff like that, that's going to be a lot of time that goes into that. And so what some companies will do is that they will move the code test to an upfront challenge so that they can screen out the people who are not interested or interesting whatsoever. And you, I'm not sure if you know or if you don't know, you perhaps you would be surprised, guys, at how many quote unquote seniors don't even know the basics of what mainstream programming is about and things like that. So let's take that you show me a product based evaluation type of thing, right? Let's say I'm going to look at your CV or like your portfolio. Guys, your portfolios can be in all kinds of states. There's like depend. I mean, if you go to my GitHub, guys, you have like 300-ish repos. I can send you a few of them, and then I can go through the source and stuff like that. But I still have to talk to you, and this might be a little bit weird for you to hear. Do you know that not all the people that you hire have a GitHub account? Do you know that like the average software developer just does this as a job? And so that's what I kind of chuckle to myself a little bit about when I talk to people on the channel who like throw up a fit and like I have GitHub accounts and like, well, why do I have to do this thing? I have tons of proof that I'm good at what I do. And I go, yeah. And if every single software developer we're hiring all had open source contributions and everybody had like really solid amounts of code that we could look into, maybe the process would change. But since we don't, and we can't assume that, we need to standardize on a process, which is usually the case because it's supposed to be fair to everybody. And now, sadly for you who's done this extra work, well, are we going to make, maybe you're special enough that we're going to make an exception. Sometimes that actually does happen, so I'm not saying that it's a waste of time. I'm just saying that there might be a reason as to why a company can't go and dive through all the projects that they've made to evaluate whether or not you're good or bad or so forth and so forth. And then like work trials and having things like take-home assignments, those are very common. I myself just with like usually at least one or two companies, like I usually say it's 50-50. One or two companies will give you a lead code or like that sort of type of challenge, computer science stuff, and the other 50% chance is to get something like a small project to complete or something like that. And it's usually, in my experience, at least in my part of the world, it's a take-home type of thing. Like you're not doing that live or anything like that. But I have been also in situations where we've done pair program, where I've gone on-prem to the actual office in my region and done the same thing, like implement some code together with some developers and stuff like that. So these things, and whether or not, if we're going to be that way, do you call other things flawed? You think that the pair programming and putting pressure on people who might be a little bit socially anxious, or having portfolio reviews or things like that, you think that that's like a perfect way to determine if someone's really, really good? I would argue not. There are some weaknesses with those approaches as well, like anxieties, for example. I can tell you that it was not fun to be to go and sit among like 5 different developers and be the guy who has the we did mob coding in that situation. I'm the guy who's writing the code. I'm there. I'm very painfully aware of that they're evaluating me, and I'm supposed to think, write code, and talk to them at the same time while we're doing things in an actual project that they are working on. That was kind of stressful. Luckily for me, I could manage it, but I can imagine quite a lot of people having problems with that because, guys, I mean, I talk to software developers who have so much nerve, they're so neurosis or like so uncomfortable just having a conversation about code that they have a hard time expressing themselves. So I would say that there are some flaws here as well. And then like the final one would be, say, blind hiring and just hiring basic people. I mean, I hope I don't have to argue about why it might not be a great idea to just hire a person based on nothing. I'm assuming that is the case. That might be a misunderstanding the concept. But as I said, usually if you really don't want to have any code challenges or anything like that, it's more than enough if you have experienced software developers to have a conversation with the individual. And as I've said before, guys, the only time you really don't want to only have that and you want to have some coding challenges and stuff like that is if you have so many people coming through the pipeline that you need to do some type of evaluation, or if you feel that this is something that that to do the code challenge you really need to do that because I don't know reasons. Because as I've said before, guys, even if I see a code challenge, even if you show me, like, the only thing the code challenge will tell me is if you can code whatsoever. Like, that's the only thing. I can't usually, or like if it's extreme, that's the thing, right? It catches extreme stuff. If it's someone who's really, really poor at the work, it might show through the code. If it's an average person or a really good person, it's going to be sometimes tricky to tell, like, based on just that. And that's why I always say at least have the personal interview, because that is the stuff that, like, if you know how to do one, you're going to figure out most of what you need to know about the individual. And there is no way And that's why I don't suggest people to like be a little bit careful when you're hiring people. Remember that even if they pass the code challenge and stuff like that, and I have seen this more than once, guys, they're really knowledgeable, they do all these right things in the interview, and then when they start working they choke anyway because they can't deal with the specific situation you put them in. And that's why you should always have a little trial period when you hire a software developer, even if they seem really, really good. So what I want you to take away from this is that the reason why people rely on flawed processes is because every single one of them have a flaw. I challenge every one of the things that you have said here now. Like, there's tons of flaws in the suggestions that you've made here on, I would argue, as well. And because when we hire people, it's usually very subjective. And in many cases, you'll find that the people doing the hiring are not experts at software development. So they might be a little bit out of the loop of what would be relevant for a specific role or things like that. Another thing that is worth knowing is that just because you are a professional software developer doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to hire people. I've worked with quite a few software developers who are like really, really high up there, like principal level, senior, staff engineer, who really don't have a good feel for, like, they don't measure up people all that well, and they don't really get a good vibe when they talk to people. So they hire people who are barely able to do the work, but in their minds, I mean, they're professionals and they're really, really good, yet for some reason they have a problem figuring out if someone else is measuring up to expectations and stuff like that, because just because you're really good at the coding doesn't necessarily mean that you have this mature holistic mindset of a true senior or a pragmatic master, call it whatever you want, right? And if you don't have that, it doesn't matter if you're a really good software developer, because you're still not going to be able to do like good hires and things like that, because it's a little bit of a skill to have the emotional intelligence and tie that together with technical experiences and match that towards a role in a specific company and in a team and things like that. So I would say that, guys, interviews, they will continue being the way that it's the same thing with work frameworks and so forth. There are trends that come and go. Some of it is always like there's always a grain of really useful stuff in it, but I argue the best way to figure out if someone's good or bad when it comes to an interview is really know your stuff, know what really matters in the team and what they're going to have to do, and like the tasks they need to be a master of and things like that. And so it's like, know the work, and then ask them about their experiences and see how close are they to understanding and relating to the realities of the workspace that you're going to put them in. That is, I argue, an evergreen concept. There are absolutely merits to all the other methods, but that single core is, I would argue, going to be true for every job for the rest of, I don't know how long we're doing interviews. Have a great day.